All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. What we thought we would do to start out before we introduce our speaker today, sometimes we do a poll at the beginning, but this time we just thought we would ask everybody to let us know where you're coming from, and you can just write that in the chat. So if you'd like to, just go to the chat, let us know where you're joining us from today. We always like to just kind of see where everybody's coming from. So thanks for doing that. And I am going to go ahead and introduce our speaker. So today we're really fortunate. We have Nora Nickum joining us. Nora is the Ocean Policy Lead at the Seattle Aquarium, and she's the author of a brand new book called Superpod. Superpod, Saving the Endangered Orcas of the Pacific Northwest. And so I work with Nora in a group that we work on together. It's called the Orca Salmon Alliance. And it's 17 different organizations or 17 groups that are all working together to try to help protect and save the southern resident orcas and the salmon that they rely on. So Nora and I get to work together on all kinds of interesting and helpful things to help the orcas. And then Nora has written this book for kids and teens to just kind of talk about how kids can get involved in helping the southern resident orcas and make them just care about them a little bit more. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Nora. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cindy. And I will note for everyone that Cindy is in this book. So that's an extra special thing in there. So my day job is at the Seattle Aquarium, and leading policy work means that I am speaking up for laws and government funding that will help protect ocean animals like the southern resident orcas and salmon and kelp forests and other kinds of habitats for those animals. And I also really like to write. So I like to write kids' books in particular. I have an almost 7-year-old daughter, and this is the first one of my books to come out, which is pretty exciting. It came out in April, and I do my writing outside my job. So I get up super early in the morning, or I write on weekends and just try and balance it all. But this was pretty fun because I get to work on orca recovery during the day, and then I meet all these scientists, and then I got to talk to them more and put them in the book. So I wanted to share a little bit about the process of researching and writing the book, what I got to do, and some of the really cool things that I learned. And I know a lot of you know quite a bit about whales, and I'm hoping you might share some of that with me during the conversation, but also maybe learn some things you didn't know before. So first, I just wanted, since this is an event particularly for youth, here's me when I was a kid, maybe in about 4th grade. I grew up on Bainbridge Island and spending a lot of time on San Juan Island and getting dirty and spending time out on the beach and looking for whales. And so that was the first time that I saw the orcas, was when I was a kid, and just trying to see them as much as I could and listen for the sound of their breath from their blowholes. And I kind of, those were always special times for me and good childhood memories. And I slowly started to learn more and more about them. And it was fun when I was writing the book to think about, could I get to know a few of them a little bit better by talking to people who know them as individuals, and kind of help people understand that they are all individuals. They're a family, but they also have their own unique characteristics and personalities. And so here's just a few of the ones that I enjoyed getting to know better. Can anyone tell me which orca this is? You can go on mute, or you can put it in the chat. Does anyone know this one? You look at there's the distinguishing feature on its dorsal fin that relates to its name.
I know, but I won't answer it.
So what do you see do you see something on its dorsal fin that's a little bit unusual? This is a southern resident, and so on its dorsal fin, it has what we call a notch. And so this one's name is Notch, and we don't know how it got that notch, but it it was some kind of injury when Notch was young, and it healed, and it's still there and visible. So that's a really good clue. That's one of those things you can look for. So here in this picture, can you tell me, could someone tell me which one of these is Notch? Look closely. Lasia.
The middle one.
It's like the one in the back.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe where they are, but yes, it's the one that's kind of, I think, ahead of the rest, but behind. So the one on the far right has the little notch in its dorsal fin. Great job. So this is Notch with his mother Tahlequah and his uncle Moby and his aunt Kiki. And I heard a lot of great stories about these particular whales, and I just love how this shows that they hang out. They travel together so closely. They're a really tight-knit family. And so here, in addition to Moby, so I mentioned his aunt Kiki and his uncle Moby. So here's a great photo from the Center for Whale Research that shows Moby. He's the big brother to Kiki, and they're kind of cuddling. And so one of the people I got to talk to was Dr. Michael Weiss from the Center for Whale Research, who was doing this research with videos, looking at how do these orcas relate to each other underwater. And he was going through all this video footage, and he had just put out a paper. And so it was really cool when I was writing the book to get to talk to scientists about what they were learning right then, and sometimes what they were learning that they hadn't had time to publish yet. And so scientists knew that orcas, that the southern residents were really tight-knit families and spent a lot of time together. And here was just an example that you couldn't really see if you were on shore or in a boat, but you could see looking down from the sky from a drone. But another thing that Michael had just learned from looking at all these videos was that not only do the southern residents stick close to their families, but they also make friends. So there were some orcas that spent a lot of time together. They would jump out of the water together. They would hunt fish together. And that was kind of new to know that these whales have close friendships with whales that are not just their siblings. So one of the things that inspired me to actually write a book about these orcas was something I saw. I might get the year wrong. I think this was 2018. I was on the shore of San Juan Island, and I saw these boats getting really close to some orcas, and I got kind of worried, and I was thinking, what are they doing? And I saw them reach this pole out over a whale, and I was trying to figure out what's going on. And I thought maybe it was a people making a movie about the whales who had some kind of camera on the end of that pole. And I didn't know what was going on, but I was kind of worried. And then the next day I saw in the news that they were out there with an orca named Scarlet, who was not doing very well. And they were trying to figure out, so there were vets out there in the boat trying to figure out what was going on. And so at the end of this pole is actually a plastic petri dish that they were holding over the whale's blowhole so they could collect some of her breath, because then they can test that breath and see if there's bacteria or other signs of illness in there. So the people out there were not trying to make a movie. They were out there helping her. And I got really interested in how all the different ways people are trying to help the southern resident orcas, and all the different ways they're trying to learn about them without getting too close, without touching them. You know, they weren't trying to take a blood sample from Scarlet. They were trying to collect her breath in a way that wouldn't bother her and wouldn't even need to touch her at all. So I wanted to share a little bit more about kind of how I explored those questions and some of the things I learned about how people are studying them and helping them, and some of the cool field trips that I got to take, which is a great thing about being an author, is people are happy to talk to you about what they're doing and what they're excited about. And sometimes you get to go to some pretty cool places. So one of the questions I had when I was thinking about how, if I'm a writer, I get to ask people all the questions that I want to answer in my book, was, why do orcas breach out of the water? And so that was one of the things I explored. And I'm wondering if anyone can share in, there's not one right answer. There's actually a lot of answers, and it's still a little bit of a mystery. So can anyone put in the chat or unmute and tell me some ideas about why orcas might breach out of the water? And one of the things I found really interesting was they're so big and heavy, it actually takes a lot of energy for them to jump out of the water. So they probably need some reasons, especially when they're not always getting enough food. You know, doing something that takes a lot of energy is kind of costly. So what ideas do you all have about why an orca might launch its body out of the water like that? Any ideas?
Maybe to help dive more.
To help dive more? That's a good one. Yeah, because when you go back, well, like if you're jumping off a diving board or something, you kind of sink down in more to the water to get air. I see, to get air. Yeah, you're out there. They have to come up for air. They can't just stay under the water. Any other ideas? Playfulness. It definitely looks fun and playful. All right, well, so what I did was, this is Mike on the left and Slick on the right. So what I did was go to Limekiln State Park, and here's a bunch of people watching orcas from shore, and you can see one way far out there if you look really closely, but sometimes they come in closer, and maybe some of you have seen them there. But one of the reasons I went was because there in that lighthouse are some researchers. So this is Dr. Bob Otis. He's been going to this lighthouse every summer for 30 years. And with him is his research assistant, Kate. And what they do is they hang out in that lighthouse and they talk to visitors and they answer questions about whales. And they wait for the orcas or other whales to swim by. And sometimes when I went there, they had been waiting for a whole month without seeing the orcas, but other times it happens more often. And when they do come by, they run out onto the rocks and they write down everything those whales are doing when they go by and what's happening around them, so that they can start to figure out, you know, what do they do and why? And so they write down, you know, are they spy hopping? Are they poking their heads out of the water? Are they swimming fast? Are they resting? And they also write down things about breaching. And so what they have found so far, and many of you had great ideas, it does seem like there's something related to playfulness and socializing, because they found that when there's more than one pod of southern residents there, they breach a lot more. So if it's just J pod, they might be breaching, but if it's J, K, and L pods, they breach more. And so it might be kind of a socializing, we're all here together. This is a way for us to interact and play. They also breach more when there are more Chinook salmon around, the times of year when Chinook are going up to the Fraser River. And so it might have something to do with a way to herd or stun the salmon, or something related to how they're trying to catch them. They also breach more when there are more boats around. So it might be a way for them to help stay in touch with each other when there's a little bit of commotion. Because you can imagine when this orca falls back down into the water, it's going to make a very big splash and a very loud splash. And so they, you know, they use sound a lot to communicate with each other. But if there's some boat noise around or something, then maybe the noise of a splash will carry better than their calls. And my favorite reason is that they tend to breach a little bit more when they are just waking up. So I think of that like they just got up from a nap and they're stretching to kind of wake up and get their energy back. But there are, you know, even Dr. Otis, who's been studying these whales for 30 years, said it's still something of a mystery exactly why they breach at different times. And I think of it a little bit like when we wave our hand or hold our hand in the air, that could mean a lot of different things depending on the context. So I might be saying hello to someone, I might be trying to get someone's attention, I might be swatting away a mosquito. I might be trying to say something in class, and it really depends on what's happening around me, what that motion might mean. And it's probably similar with things like orca behavior, that they might do one thing, but they might do it for different reasons at different times. So we've talked a little bit about a couple of the ways scientists are studying the orcas without even having to touch them, like using that petri dish to collect breath samples and standing on shore and just watching and observing what they do. And another way they do that is with drones. And we talked a little bit about that with the friendship and family videos. But I also talked to Holly Fernbach and John Durbin, who have been studying these orcas and other whales using drones before. Colin, did you have a question?
I saw this video of this drone putting a tracking device on a blue whale, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it
Yep.
reminded me of this.
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. Holly and John also use drones to collect those breath samples from other kinds of whales. So they can be good research tools for a lot of different things, which is pretty cool. So one of the things that Holly and John are looking for is how's the whale, an individual whale's health? So what does their body look like? Do they look like they're getting enough to eat? Do they look like they're getting skinny? How are they growing? So here's an example. This is Tahlequah back in September of 2019. So this is kind of what they start comparing her to, and they can measure based on these photos, they can measure how long the whale is and how wide they are at different parts of their body. And here, almost a year later, does she look a little bit different? Can you see something? What looks different about Tahlequah a year later?
She looks pregnant.
She looks pregnant, exactly. She's a little bit bigger there in the middle. And here, just a couple months later, she's even bigger still. And then, yay, Phoenix was born in the fall. So this is a good way one way to learn if a whale is pregnant, if there might be a calf coming, or if they're getting enough to eat, or if they're getting too skinny. And then people can kind of keep track of how they're all doing and see if we need to think about if there's a way to help if they need it. And here's just one more picture that I love of Phoenix playing next to his mom. I think Phoenix is a boy. Maybe I got that wrong. So we talked a little bit about friendship. So here's just another video or drone picture from the Center for Whale Research. So this is Kiki on the bottom and Tofino on the top. And Michael Weiss from the Center for Whale Research was telling me stories about these two whales who are really good friends. But he said that Kiki, who's on the bottom, actually started out being Tofino's babysitter. So these orcas need babysitters because the mom needs to be able to dive down and spend a while, maybe half an hour at least, chasing a salmon to bring it back up to share with her family. And they don't want to leave their calves alone up closer to the surface during that time. So another orca might help babysit, and sometimes that's an aunt or an uncle, but it can also be someone who's not a close family member, like Kiki, who's just an older youngster. So I don't know if you can see the salmon in this picture. It's kind of up in the upper left. They're both going after it, and unfortunately, they did not manage to catch this because youngsters have to practice a lot and kind of learn. But Michael was telling me that after this, he saw these two whales kind of comforting each other as if they were saying, well, we didn't get that one, but we tried hard and we'll get the next one. And then they kind of went off swimming together. I see Bo saying that, longer have audio. I'm not sure. Maybe Katie can see if there's any way to troubleshoot, but if anyone else is having trouble, let me know. So another field trip I got to go on was out on the boat with Dr. Giles and her dog Eba. And I bet some of you have heard about Giles and Eba before because they are pretty awesome and doing really interesting work. So I went out on the boat with them. They were trying to collect whale scat, which is whale poop. And this particular day, there were not Southern residents around. So we were going behind transients, pretty far behind the transients, so that I couldn't see the whales very well. But this dog, Eva, was working really hard at sniffing out that smell of orca poop. Because if the scientists can collect that scat, they can learn a lot in the lab. They can learn what was the whale eating. They can learn whether that particular whale was sick or pregnant or stressed out, whether it had parasites. And so that's also just really important information just to learn more about the whales in general, but also to learn about the health of individuals. So here, Giles, the scientist, is kind of looking at where is Eva pointing her nose, and Giles is pointing, so the boat captain knows which direction to point the boat in to try and collect some scat. And they had been out on this boat every day for a couple of weeks. Maybe not every day, but they'd been out something like 14 times before I got there without managing to collect anything. So they were really hoping to find some. And Giles was also wondering if Eva was going to have an easy time finding transient orca scat, because dogs have to learn the smells of different kinds of animal scat. So like bear poop does not smell the same as Southern resident orca poop, and that also does not smell the same as transient orca poop. And Eva was really good at finding Southern resident scat, but she hadn't had as much practice with transient scat. So, but here you can see this is what she does when she gets really focused. Like now she realizes a whale has, this is the slide. Good job, everyone who spotted Ollie. So Eva is getting really focused here because the whale must have pooped, and Eva can smell it, and she's pointing even more intently at the water to figure out where it might be. And the boat captain is trying to figure out where to drive the boat. But one thing I thought was really cool, because it's really hard to see things floating in the water, but what they did was get a bunch of cereal, like imagine a whole bunch of Cheerios or something, and they threw them in the water where Eva was pointing her nose, so that then they could circle back the boat and look for the cereal, which would be an easier thing to spot. So they managed to scoop up this sample, and I love this picture because Giles was so excited to find this sample, and you can kind of see it in her face here. She's so excited. And one of the things that was most surprising to me was how tiny this whale poop was. Because think about how big a whale is. I would have thought the whale poop would be much bigger, but this is pretty small. And the dog could smell it from a mile away. I couldn't smell it when it was this close. So that dog is pretty talented. Here is, I have to give you a close-up of this whale poop. So this is transient orca poop, and transient orcas do not eat salmon. They eat marine mammals. So the scat was full of hair instead of fish scales or something. So that was pretty different. And the reason that Eva gets so excited about doing this job and works so hard to find those samples for the scientists is that her reward is getting to play with her favorite rope toy as soon as she manages to help them find a sample. So this is the playtime on the boat. So what they're going after, what the Southern residents would be going after, is Chinook salmon. So the other thing I wanted to write about in the book is how important salmon are to these whales, and what's going on with salmon, and why there aren't quite enough for them to eat because of, people have fished some of them out. There have been dams built. There's not a lot of trees and shade along rivers, and not good habitat for the salmon. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and that some of that is being done to try and make there be more salmon for people, including tribes and people who fish for a living, and for the whole ecosystem, including the orcas. So one of the fun things that I did while I was researching the book was to go to the Cedar River. That's a river that is kind of near Seattle, and it's one of the rivers that salmon spawn in. So in the fall, the ones that were born in that river come back to that river to lay their eggs. and they have to swim through the Ballard Locks, and they have to swim through Lake Washington and then way up this river, and they're getting pretty worn out. And it was really fun to go try and see them. And one of the things that I found really fun was that this river, most of the salmon in this river are sockeye salmon, which are red when they're spawning, and they're pretty easy to spot. But I really wanted to see a Chinook, because I really wanted to be able to write in the book about seeing a Chinook, because that's the kind of salmon that the southern residents like the most, because it's the biggest and fattiest and gives them the most energy. And you know, sometimes when people are trying to spot the orcas, they are texting each other or calling each other or looking online, like, where are the whales here? Oh, I just saw them over here. And everyone drives there to try and see them. And on this day, I was kind of doing that, but about Chinook salmon. And I had someone from the Seattle Aquarium who was at the side of the river volunteering and talking to people, and she was texting me about where I could go spot a Chinook, because there weren't very many. So I was very excited that I managed to see one, even though it was just kind of this brown thing in the river, not as colorful as the sockeye, but Chinook are pretty special. So it was fun to be able to see one. So one of the reasons that I called the book Superpod is two reasons. One is because when J, K, and L pods all get together in one place, kind of for a big fun family reunion splash party, that's called a Superpod, as many of you may know. But I also, you know, sometimes all the people who are working to help the orcas are another kind of Superpod, or people who get together to celebrate them or learn about them sometimes call themselves a Superpod. So it's kind of a fun word to think about, you know, helping. If you're working to help them, you're part of the Superpod too. And this is someone, Tamas, who's a member of the Lummi Nation, one of the indigenous peoples of the Salish region. And I got to talk to her a lot about how these southern resident orcas are family to the Lummi Nation and how much they care about them, and how the Lummi also depend on salmon. And so recovering salmon and recovering orcas is really important to them. And so they're doing some really important work and raising their voices to help protect the ecosystem and the whales. I also had fun trying to find places to go watch the whales from shore, and Orca Network was a great resource for that. I didn't take this photo. I didn't get quite that close. This is a great photo that Caroline Matter took from Vashon Island. And I love this one because it gives you a sense of how big those dorsal fins are. So a male dorsal fin can be about 6 feet tall, which is, you know, about as tall as a pretty tall grown-up. But I got to see some of them from Bainbridge by looking for those Orca Network posts. And I thought it was really cool just to think about how many people get to learn more about the whales and enjoy seeing them and feel a connection because of all the information that's out there and the chances to go watch them when they come by. And then another person I talked to, thanks to Cindy putting me in touch, was Taylor, who lives in the southern part of Washington. And when she was in middle school, she painted this amazing mural. It's actually bigger than this, but this is what we get in the photo. She painted this amazing mural in her school. She got permission from her teacher to put this on the wall in the school as part of a school project, because she cared so much about the southern resident orcas and was worried about them being endangered, and wanted to let other people get to know that why she loved them and what was happening with them. So this is a way to start a lot of conversations and tell people, you know, how cool they were and what they could do to help them. So in the book, I wanted to include lots of, you know, hopeful stories, all the ways that people are helping the whales. And one of the things that had happened fairly recently when I was writing this, because I was doing my research in 2021, was that there was this dam on the middle fork of the Nooksack River that's close to Bellingham. And so it was built in 1961 because the city of Bellingham needed some drinking water for people's houses. And so they built this dam and diverted some of the water over to Bellingham so people could drink water. But the problem was, when there was a dam there, all the salmon, including the Chinook, couldn't swim up the river anymore to spawn and lay their eggs. And so that means you don't have as many baby salmon growing up to be big and out there in the ecosystem and available for orcas to eat. So a few decades later, a couple of tribes, as well as the city of Bellingham and some nonprofit organizations, started working together to figure out, could this dam be removed? And they found another way to get water to the city of Bellingham that didn't require blocking the river with a dam. And then they worked to remove the dam. And so in April 2021, it looked like this. Now salmon could swim upstream. And this is a particularly great place to let salmon go further up, because the further up you go, you actually get pretty close to the mountains where the water is nice and cool. And with the climate changing and things getting hotter, salmon really need to be able to find some cool water. So this is a good place. So they had to use some explosives to get part of that dam out, and equipment, and it took a couple years, but it's not there anymore. And so the Chinook salmon can go upstream to spawn, and hopefully from that river there'll be more salmon coming in the next few years. A lot of those are the stories in the book, and there's a lot more in there. And if you would like to read the book, it is available at the Langley Whale Center. It's also in a lot of libraries, including far from Washington State, across the country, and various other places. And I have some other videos and other things linked from my website. That's right here. So I have a couple of activities now, and then we can take questions. Does that sound good, Katie, or should we do questions first?
Maybe questions first, and then
Okay.
while it's fresh on their mind.
Yeah, great. Yes, Bo, you can say something if you can hear again, hopefully.
I've seen an orca in person.
You have. Where were you?
I was in Washington.
In Washington. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. I bet that was really memorable.
But I live very far from Washington.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were able to see them. That's pretty special.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to share anything or ask any questions? Well, I'll keep an eye on the chat. So if you do want to put a question in there, I will keep an eye on that. But first, I knew a lot about these orcas before I wrote the book, but I learned a lot while I was researching it and talking to scientists and just trying to learn as much as I could. So I wanted to do a few trivia questions, especially for those of you who maybe know quite a lot about whales already, but for anyone, just a few random things I learned that I didn't know before I wrote the book. So if you could put your ideas in the chat for each question, that would be great. So there's 3 of them. So the first one is, are orca calves born head first or fluke first? The fluke is the tail.
Luke.
I think I heard someone say fluke.
That was me.
Okay. Anyone want to put a thought in the chat? Okay, Ashley says, I think fluke. My son thinks head first. Well, I had not thought about this before, but a lot of animals I think are born head first, but orca calves are born fluke first, tail first. And what I read about that was that they, after they're born, they need to be able to swim up to the surface to get a breath of air because they can't breathe underwater. And their tail needs to be kind of strong and sturdy in order to help push them up there. But when they're born, their tail is kind of floppy. But if it comes out first, then it has time in the cool water to kind of harden and give them the strength to push themselves up to the surface. I hope that's true because I put it in the book, but I thought that was a cool thing. All right, here's the next question. Do orcas drink seawater?
No,
Yes and a no. And a yes. Well, they couldn't really drink fresh water very easily because there's no fresh water in the ocean. I guess they could open their mouths and hope for rain, but they don't actually drink seawater either. They don't actually need to drink any water. I mean, maybe I'm sure some of it ends up in their mouth, but they don't need to because when their bodies digest the fish, all the kind of chemical processes happening in their bodies get water out of their food.
I
So
meant
they
no.
don't have to intentionally drink anything. What was that?
I meant to say no, but
I meant to say no. Okay.
I said yes.
Yeah. I find it kind of hard to picture, hard to imagine being an animal that doesn't need to drink anything on purpose, that can just get all my hydration from my food. But
Yeah.
apparently that's the way it is for orcas. Okay, last question. Orca calves drink milk from their mothers. So for the first few years, they drink a lot of milk, like because they're mammals. What percent fat is that milk? And for comparison, if you go to the grocery store, you can buy cow milk that's skim milk, which is 0%, or you can get low fat milk that's 1%, or some people get 2%, or whole milk is our fattiest milk that we usually get at the store is 3.5%. So what percent fat do orcas get from their moms? Ashley says 30%. Dan says 50%. That's lots of good fat in there, lots of calories. 35. Well, you are all in the right range. It's about 40%. So you average all your answers. I think you all got it. And people say if you have a hard question, you just ask a bunch of people and then average the results and they'll be about right. And I think you all did that. But that's a lot thicker and creamier than the cow milk that we consider kind of what we're used to. So that's pretty different, but they need to be able to put on some blubber and have lots of energy. And so that's good. All right. Now we have a quick fun activity that you can do if you're able to open up the internet from the computer or a phone. Cindy has put the direct link in the chat, or you can go to seattleaquarium.org/blog, and it might be the top blog or one of the early blogs. And I'm going to go to the internet myself right now so I can show you what I'm doing. Let's see. I'm going to share my other screen. So this is a new quiz that the Seattle Aquarium made to figure out which of these southern resident orcas is your alter ego, which kind of means like which one are you the most like.
Wait,
So is anyone, raise your hand if you've been able to find this web page on your computer.
Can you go back to the website? I need to scan it.
I don't have a QR code, but can you find it in the chat? Cindy put the link in the chat.
I can't really see your screen.
I don't know. Can you just go back to the name of the website, maybe?
Yeah.
Here, Eric, I can send you oh, you can't see the chat? Or not Eric, Colin.
I can.
Oh, it's in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should be able to just click on that link and it'll go directly there. Oh, cool. We've got some results.
Oh, good. So if you click through this, it'll
I
ask you
see it
questions
here.
like this. And so what I want you each to do is answer all these questions and then tell me in the chat which orca you are most like. So Ashley got Ocean Sun. I agree. Sometimes I feel like I'm in my 90s too, but Ocean Sun is very wise. She's a wise leader. Colin. You raising your hand?
If I click it, it won't go to the website.
Hmm.
Colin, if you just go to seattleaquarium.org and just scroll down to the bottom of that homepage, there's a link there.
I
that
got
can
it.
try. You got it?
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. So take a couple minutes to answer those questions and then tell me in the chat which orca you are matched with and what you think about that. Or you can unmute. I don't know why my hand looks raised. I'm going to put it down.
Dad, what does this say?
And there are, I
oh.
think there are 6 different whales you could be matched to. So we'll see whether this group manages to cover all 6 or whether a lot of you are matched to the same one. Okay, Dan got Kiki. Kiki, the one we met a few slides ago. Kiki's the one who's the babysitter of Tofino. Funky little youngster. Onyx. Awesome. Onyx is a really interesting one who spent some time with all 3 of the different pods. And so I like to think about when there's a super pod and all the pods are together, Onyx is one who would know all the whales probably really well because he spent time with each of those pods. Prosper. All right. Prosper, the youngest one. Prosper is a baby who I think is maybe a little over the age of 1 now in K-Pod, and was very exciting when Prosper was born because that was the first calf born in K-Pod in, I think, 11 years. So it was really nice to have a youngster there. And another Kiki. Let's see. Did you want to, is that everyone? That's pretty fun. Prosper is very cute. Yes. All right. I think, oh, Katie got Blackberry. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Onyx, it's mine.
Onyx, all right. I do love Blackberry too. Blackberry is the first one of the 7 residents who I learned how to identify by myself. That was very exciting. All right. Well, I hope you'll share this quiz with others if you enjoyed it. And does anyone have any other things to share or questions?
I don't think.
All right, good, Cindy. Okay. Take it 3 times, you get 3 different answers. That's great. It's because you've got so much in common with all of them.
That's right. I was trying for cookie and got Blackberry, so then I took it again and got Oreo.
Do we know if there are any pregnant ones now? That's a good question. I am not aware. Cindy, do you know if that's about that?
We were just having a conversation about that a couple days ago with Michael Weiss and Monica Whelan Shields, another orca researcher, and we do not know of any at this point. So there probably are some, but we just haven't heard about it from any of the researchers.
And they're pregnant for so long that it's probably a little while before they would show visually. I guess the scat sample would tell you something, but it can be, you know, several months before the analysis of the scat samples happens after they're collected. At this point, I know Giles is trying to speed that up. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you all for joining me and participating and asking some great questions and sharing your own experiences.
Miss,
Thanks so much, Nora. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all you're
We
doing.
got your book
everyone,
to
to help
read
along.
aloud.
All right. Yay. That's great.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoy it.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get your book.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Great
Have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.